The lab needed 4 business days to end my marriage, and I spent 3 of them mowing the lawn like a man who still had a family. My name is Cole Brennan. I was 38 that spring, a senior claims adjuster at Halloran Mutual in Dayton, Ohio, which is a fancy way of saying I got paid to find the exact place where a story stops matching the paperwork. 12 years of fire reports and staged rear endings teaches you one thing. People rarely lie about the big stuff. They lie about a small, stupid detail, and that detail is a loose thread. And if you pull it slowly, the whole sweater comes off in your hands. My loose thread was a blood type on a hospital printout. It started on a Tuesday in March. My youngest, June, was 4, and she went off the back step chasing a ball and split her chin on the concrete. Ivy was at work, so I drove June to the urgent care on Far Hills, with a dish towel against her face while she told me, very seriously, that the ball had done it on purpose. 4 stitches, a grape popsicle, a shark sticker. On the way out, the nurse handed me the discharge summary, and I stood in the parking lot reading it line by line. Because that is a sickness, and not a skill. Blood type AB positive. I am O positive. I know this because I have given blood at the Halloran Mutual Drive every October for 11 years, for a free t-shirt and a package of Nutter Butters. Ivy is O2. She told me when she was pregnant with our first, back when we talked about that sort of thing at the kitchen table, with a folder from the birthing class open between us. 2 O parents do not make an AB child. That is not an opinion. That is the same arithmetic that says a house cannot burn from the outside in. I sat in the pilot in that lot with my daughter humming in the back seat and felt no rage at all. I felt something colder and more administrative. I felt a file open in my head. We had been married 11 years. Ivy Lasco when I met her, Ivy Brennan on the mortgage, 36, office manager at Vance Family Dental in Oakwood. The kind of woman who remembered which of my coworkers were going through a divorce and asked after them by name. 3 kids, Maddie, 11, who corrected my grammar with an apology in her voice. Theo, 8, who could name every county in Ohio and no state capitals. June, 4, chin now stitched, ruler of the household. A 4-bedroom on Ferncliff Road with a garage I had drywalled myself. I had not suspected her, not once. I was the guy at the neighborhood cookout who said, with an entire beer in him, that trust is just interest you earn on years. I said that out loud, to actual people, while holding a hot dog. So I did what I do. I opened a file. I did not buy cameras or hide recorders in her RAV4, and not because I was above it. 12 years of watching people wreck their own claims taught me that evidence obtained badly is a bomb that goes off in your own hands in a courtroom. What I needed was clean, boring, and dull enough to survive a lawyer. I started with the cheap thing. Thursday night after bath and books, I sat on the edge of each kid's bed with a mail-order kit from a company called Ridgeline and swabbed the inside of their cheeks while they slept, telling myself this would come back a lab error, and I would feel like a monster for a week and never tell anyone. June sighed and turned her stitched chin away from me. Maddie half woke and mumbled something about a field trip permission slip, and I said I would sign it, and she went back under. 4 envelopes, 3 theirs and 1 mine, into the Dropbox on Woodman at 11 at night. Me in a work fleece over pajama pants, with my hands doing a thing I had no name for. Then I waited. And here's what nobody tells you about waiting. You keep being a father the whole time. Saturday, I stood in the drizzle at Theo's soccer game. Sunday, I made pancakes with a face of chocolate chips, because that is what June requires, and there is no appealing the decision. Ivy came up behind me at the stove and put her forehead between my shoulder blades and said the kitchen smelled like her childhood. And I said something back, and I could not tell you now what it was. The email came Wednesday at 2:41 in the afternoon. I was on a site inspection in Springfield, a warehouse where a sprinkler line had let go and ruined $400,000 of laminate. And I stood in a puddle in somebody else's ruined building and typed in the access code with my thumb. The report used the word probability a great deal. Ridgeline is careful. They give you a number and a lot of language about alleged fathers, and it takes a second to translate the caution into English. 0%. Not one of them. Not Maddie, not Theo, not June. I read it 3 times. Then the fine print, the part that says the result is not admissible in court. And I remember thinking, with total clarity that I would have to do this again properly. Logistics, not rage. My brain put the grief in a box in the garage and has never once come back for it. I finished the inspection with water in my shoes. Then I sat in the speedway lot on Route 4 with the engine off and did the arithmetic everyone in my position eventually does, which is not who, but when. Maddie was 11. That is not an affair. An affair has a start and a panic and an end. 11 years and 3 kids is a second household running parallel to mine, funded partly by me. And the only reason I never noticed is that I was busy being extremely proud of my life. And then I thought about the AB positive, and I got very still, because AB is rare. Under 4% of people, which meant the man who made my youngest daughter had left a fingerprint in a hospital chart, and I already had it. That was the moment I stopped being sad and started being useful. I gave myself 2 weeks before I said a word to her. 2 weeks is nothing. 2 weeks is a pay period. But you can do a lot of quiet work in a pay period if you already know how paper moves. First, I redid the test the right way. There is a collection site off Wilmington Pike where a phlebotomist named Denise checks your ID, photographs you, swabs you herself, and signs a chain of custody form. I took the kids on a Saturday and told them it was a vitamin check for school. Theo asked 11 questions about the swab. Maddie asked 0, which is its own kind of knife. Second, I pulled our own life like a claim file. Mortgage servicer, credit union, both cards, the county auditor. That is where a personal tragedy turned into a case. In October, a home equity line of credit had been opened against the house on Ferncliff Road for $85,000. My name was on it. My signature was on it, in a way that would have embarrassed a middle schooler, a fat looping C I have not made since I was 19. The closing was done by a mobile notary at a Panera in Beaver Creek on a Thursday, when I was, according to my own expense reports, in Toledo looking at hail damage on a Kroger roof. I sat in the basement with the laptop and the furnace ticking and felt the first real heat come up the back of my neck, because a lie about love is something you can argue about forever, and a forged signature on a lien is a felony with a statute number. Third, I found where the money went, which took 10 minutes, because she had never considered that I would look. $61,000 went out in 4 wires to an account labeled VFD Holdings, Vance Family Dental. The rest went to a private school in Kettering called St. Ansgar Academy, tuition for 2 students, invoice to a family account that was not ours. Dr. Ryan Vance, Ivy's boss for 11 years, the man who sent a fruit basket when June was born and stood in my kitchen at our 4th of July cookout in salmon shorts, telling me about a bass boat. I had liked him. I want that on the record, because it is the most humiliating sentence in this entire story. I had liked him, and I had told my wife she was lucky to work for a decent guy. My kids went to Wexford Elementary, the public school, all 3 of them. The tuition at St. Ansgar was for Ryan Vance's other 2 children, the ones he had with his wife. My equity, my house, private school for the legitimate children of the man who had made all 3 of mine. I put my head down on my desk at Halloran Mutual for about 90 seconds. Then I walked down the hall to Dorothy Falk, who runs our special investigations unit, and gave her a hypothetical about a spousal forgery on a home equity line. She told me how she would build it, looked at me over her reading glasses a second too long, and said the hypothetical husband should get a lawyer today, not tomorrow. Her name was Ann Kovac, 3rd floor of a building on Main with a radiator that banged. She heard me out for 40 minutes without one expression crossing her face, then told me 3 things I have never forgotten. That Ohio gives a man defrauded into paternity a window to undo it, that the window is not infinite, and that men lose it every day by waiting until they feel emotionally prepared. That Ohio is a one-party consent state, so if I am part of a conversation, I may record it, and no one has to know but me. And that the moment I open my mouth to my wife, every asset in that house would grow legs. I did it in that order. I moved $11,000, exactly half the joint savings, into an account in my name only, and documented it in the memo line. Because Ann said judges hate men who empty accounts and forgive men who split them in writing. I got certified copies of the closing package. I photographed the notary's journal at the UPS store in Beaver Creek, And the clerk remembered Ivy, because Ivy had brought a small blonde girl who kept asking for a cake pop. June. My June was in the room when my name was forged. On the 15th day, the legal results came back and said what the cheap ones had, in language that would stand up in a courtroom. 0, 0, 0. I picked a Thursday. The kids went to my mother's in Kettering for the night, which was normal, because Diane had taken them one weeknight a month since Maddie was a baby. I made the chicken thing with the mustard sauce that Ivy liked and opened a bottle of wine. And by the time she got home at 6:40, I had 3 envelopes squared up on the counter next to the salt and pepper, like place settings. She came in with her coat over her arm, stopped in the doorway when she saw the table set and said, "What's the occasion?" I said, "I want you to tell me about the Panera in Beaver Creek." That was when the temperature in my kitchen dropped about 40 degrees, and my wife of 11 years put her coat down very slowly on the back of a chair, and I hit record on the phone in my shirt pocket. She tried the first door, which is always confusion. She said she did not know what I was talking about, lightly, with a little laugh at the end, the laugh you use on a man who has gotten a detail wrong. I slid the closing package across the counter and told her to look at page 4, at the signature, at the fat looping C. She looked at it for maybe 6 seconds. Then she tried the second door, which is anger. I had been going through her things. It was unbelievable that I would spy on her. Her voice came up 30%, and she was not scared yet. She was performing insulted, and I let her run to the end of it, because a person who is performing has to stop eventually to breathe. Then I opened the first envelope and read the number out loud. Maddie, 0%. I have replayed her face 1,000 times. It did not crumble. It went blank, the way a screen goes blank. And she said, in a voice I had never heard from her, "Which lab?" Not "who told you?" Not "this is a mistake." Which lab? She wanted to know if it was the good one. That is the second my marriage stopped being something I was losing and became something I was documenting. I opened the second envelope. Theo, 0. The third, June, 0. Then it came apart, and it came apart loud. She said it was only Maddie, in a rush, like a confession rehearsed in the car for 11 years. One mistake, before we were solid. She panicked. She never knew for sure. The others were mine and the tests were wrong. I told her all 3 came from the same accredited lab with the same chain of custody, and she screamed that I did not know what I was talking about. And I said the words A, B, positive, and she stopped like she had walked into a wall. She started to cry then, and I do not think it was fake. 11 years of construction had just come down, and she was standing in it. That did not make it my problem. She got angry again on the way back up. That is the part nobody warns you about. The way a person caught in something enormous starts swinging at whatever is closest, which was me. I was never present. I worked constantly. I looked at everything in our lives like a claim file, and living with me was like being audited by someone who says he loves you. Some of that landed. Some of it is true. It is also true that being lonely in a marriage is a reason to have a hard conversation, not a reason to run a decade-long counterfeit. I said one sentence back. 11 years, Ivy. 11 years of me buying booster seats for a man in salmon shorts. She threw the wine glass, not at me, which I believe, and it hit the cabinet by the fridge and came apart, and the sound of it was the loudest thing that had ever happened in that kitchen. Then she stood there in a spreading puddle of Cabernet with her hands shaking and said, "Don't you dare say his name in this house." Which is how I learned I was right about Vance without asking. We went another 40 minutes. She grabbed the envelopes and tore 2 of them. And I let her, because those were copies and the originals sat in a fire safe at Ann Kovich's office. She slammed the powder room door hard enough to knock a picture off the wall, the one from Hocking Hills where Theo has his eyes closed. When she came back out, her face was scrubbed, and she was calm in a way that frightened me more than the screaming. And she said we could fix this, that people fixed worse, that the kids needed us both. And she said the kids like a woman playing the last card in her hand. That is when I made my one mistake of the entire campaign. I said, "You used them as a shield for 11 years, and you're doing it right now." She hit me, open hand, hard, across the mouth, and my lips split against my own teeth, and I tasted copper and stood there with my hands down at my sides, doing nothing at all. Because Anne had told me on the 3rd floor of that building, with the banging radiator, that the day a man puts a hand on his wife is the day he loses everything, no matter what she did. So I stood there and bled on my own kitchen floor and did not move. And I heard my own voice say, very calmly, "That was on tape." She looked at my shirt pocket. Then she went upstairs. I slept in the basement. At 2 a.m., I heard her come down and stand at the bottom of the stairs a long time without speaking, and eventually go back up. In the morning, she was gone, and there was a note on the counter saying, "We needed to talk when we were both calm," which remains the funniest document of that entire year. Friday morning, I called Anne from the parking garage at work with my lips swollen and told her everything. She asked if I had struck back. I said no. She asked if I had the recording. I said yes. There was a pause, and then she said, in the flattest possible voice, "Cole, you just became a very good client." The audio gave us three things: Ivy admitting the first affair, Ivy identifying the father by protecting his name, and Ivy saying, mid-fight, "I signed the paperwork because you would never have agreed to it," which is not a confession of forgery in so many words, but any prosecutor in Montgomery County can hear the shape of one. That afternoon, I did something Anne told me not to do. She said to let the process work. Do not approach the man. Do not create a scene. Do not give them anything to point at. I said I understood, and I meant it, and then I got in my truck at 4:15 on a Friday and drove to Oakwood. Because here's the thing about being extremely reasonable for 15 straight days. It does not cool anything. It pressurizes it. Vance Family Dental had a nice lobby. Slate floor, saltwater tank, jazz at a volume designed to make you feel like a person with a retirement plan. I stood in it with a split lip and a manila folder and asked the woman at the desk if Dr. Vance had a minute. He came out through the door by the fish tank and scrubs with a coffee in his hand and had the nerve to smile at me. He said my name like we were about to talk about the Bengals. Then he saw the lip and the folder, and the smile went off his face in stages, like a building losing power. He said, "Cole, let's step outside." We went to the side lot where the staff parked, between a black Tahoe and a dumpster enclosure with a broken gate. In the movies, this is a good scene. In life, it was two middle-aged men embarrassing themselves in front of a dumpster. I held up the first page and told him I had 3 tests, all 3-0, and that his practice had taken $61,000 off a home equity line with a forged signature on it. Then I asked him one question: how long? He said, "You need to talk to Ivy about this." I said the number 61,000 again. Then he said the thing that made everything after it inevitable. "You're going to want to be careful. You've got a lot to lose here, and I don't." He tried to walk past me to the Tahoe, and I put my hand flat on his chest to stop him, which was the wrong thing to do, and which I did anyway. He shoved me. I shoved him back harder than I meant to, and he went into the side mirror of the Tahoe, and his coffee went over both of us. And then it was not fighting, it was grabbing. He got 2 handfuls of my shirt and tore the placket clean off the buttons, and we went sideways into the dumpster gate, which folded because it was already broken. My knee hit concrete. He got an elbow into my mouth, right on the split my wife had put there the night before, and it opened again, and I bled down my chin onto both of us. He went down under me on his back, and his glasses came apart, and one of the arms opened a cut under his eye, and there was suddenly a great deal of blood on a man in clean scrubs. Then it was over, because it is always over in 11 seconds. We sat on the ground 4 feet apart, breathing like animals, and neither of us had won anything. A hygienist named Priya Raman had come out for a smoke and watched the whole thing from the back step with her phone up. Someone called the police. Oakwood PD showed up in 4 minutes, separated us, took statements, photographed my mouth and his face. Vance said I had assaulted him. I said I had put a hand on his chest. He had shoved me. I had shoved back, and there was video. Priya, who did not know me at all, told the officer what she had seen, which was that the doctor pushed first. No charges. Mutual, ugly, stupid, nothing anybody wanted to prosecute. I drove home with my shirt hanging open and shook for 20 minutes in my own driveway. And still, read the ledger. That parking lot got me 3 things I could not have bought. Priya Raman, who called the following Tuesday from her car and said she had worked there 6 years, that everyone in that office had known, and that in 2019, the practice had paid Ivy for 11 months when she was not working. A police report documenting, in a neutral government voice, that Ryan Vance told an officer he had no relationship with my wife outside of employment. And Karen Vance. She called on a Wednesday night. I did not know the number. She said, "This is Karen, Ryan's wife. I'd like to buy you a coffee, and I'd like it to not be in Oakwood." We met at a Panera in Beaver Creek, which I did not choose, and which I noticed. Karen Vance was 51, a hygienist before she had kids, and, as it turned out, 50% owner of Vance Family Dental as an S corporation, a detail Ryan had apparently stopped thinking about around 2014. She had been suspicious for 6 years and had never had anything she could put on a table. I put things on a table. She read every page without one word. Then she asked me something I had not prepared for. "How old is your youngest?" I said, "June was 4, born in September of 2021. Karen looked out the window at the parking lot for a long moment. Then she said, "Ryan had a vasectomy in March of 2020. I drove him. He was on the couch 3 days complaining about a bag of frozen peas. I had the follow-up on the calendar and it cleared. Cole, whoever your youngest belongs to, it isn't my husband." I sat in that Panera under the glowing menu board and felt the floor move a second time in 3 weeks. I had built an entire architecture in my head, ugly but tidy. 1 wife, 1 liar, 1 man, 11 years, 3 kids, done. Karen Vance had just told me the architecture had a room in it I had not drawn. 2 men. At least 2. I drove home the long way and ran the calendar the way I run a lost timeline. Fall of 2020 into winter of 2021. Then I remembered and had to pull the truck onto the gravel by the bike path and sit there with my hands at 10 and 2 like a student driver. My brother Wade had been living in our guest room. Wade is 4 years younger than me. In November of 2020, his wife left him and took the dog and most of the furniture, and he called me from a Waffle House parking lot at 1 in the morning, and I drove out and got him, and he slept in the guest room off our kitchen for 8 months. I made up that bed myself. He was between jobs and home during the day. Ivy worked from home 2 days a week that whole winter, and I was in the field eating gas station sandwiches in a truck. June was born in September of 2021. Wade moved out in July. And June has the same laugh he does. That awful honking laugh that my father had, that I do not have, that skipped me and landed on my brother and then, apparently, on a little girl who calls me daddy. I sat on that gravel shoulder for a long time. Then I called Ann Kovacs and left a voicemail asking how you get a DNA sample from a family member without asking for one. She called back and told me professionally that you do not, and that if I wanted it done, I would do it her way, in the open, with witnesses, which is how I ended up at my mother's 66th birthday party. Diane Brennan's birthday is the second Sunday in June, observed the same way since 1998. Sheet cake from Kroger, potato salad everyone politely calls the best, folding tables in the backyard of the ranch house in Kettering, garage door open so the men have somewhere to stand. Ivy had moved to her sister's place in Centerville by then and had the kids most nights, and that Sunday, they were with her, which I had made sure of. Whatever was about to happen was not going to happen in front of them. I need that understood. I ran the whole rest of my life on that one rule, and I did not break it once. I got there at 2. Wade was in the garage with a beer, and he hugged me, and I hugged him back, and I have never worked harder at anything in my life. I waited until the cake. 16 people in the backyard. My Aunt Bev, my cousin and his wife, the Kaminskis from next door. My mother in a chair wearing a paper crown Wade had put on her head, because Wade is the one who makes a room warmer, and I am the one who checks the gutters. I stood up and said I had something to say, and my mother's face changed before I got to a second sentence. That is the detail I keep. She knew from the shape of me standing up. I said I had run legal paternity tests on all 3 of my children, that none of them were mine, and that the father of the older 2 was Ryan Vance. There was a noise in that yard I have never heard before or since. 16 people inhaling at once. Somebody's fork hit a paper plate. Then I turned to my brother and I said, "June's not his, Wade. He had a vasectomy in 2020. Wade set his beer down very carefully, and that told me everything, because a man with nothing to hide does not put down his drink first. He said, "Cole, come on." I said, "It's a cheek swab." It's 15 seconds. Do it right now in front of Mom, and I'll apologize to you every Christmas for the rest of my life." He said no. He said it about 4 different ways in about 20 seconds, all of them loud, and the loudness is what did it, because everyone in that yard was watching a man refuse a 15-second test. And then my mother said, from her chair, in her paper crown, "Wade, stop." Everything stopped. She had her hands flat on the arms of the chair, and she was looking at the grass, and she said, "I already know." I said, "You already know what, Mom?" And Diane Brennan, 66 years old that day, told her entire backyard that in the spring of 2022, she had taken a hairbrush and a pacifier out of my house and paid $490 for a private test because she had watched Wade hold that baby at Easter and something in her stomach turned over. It came back in 11 days. She put the envelope in the kitchen drawer with the batteries and the coupons and left it there 4 years. She said, "I was trying to hold this family together. I asked her, and I did not yell, whether at any point in 4 years she had considered that the family she was holding together did not exist, and that she had let me spend those years raising my brother's daughter while everyone at Christmas watched me do it." She started to cry. My Aunt Bev started to cry. I felt absolutely nothing, which frightened me later, in the truck. That is when Wade came across the yard. He grabbed the front of my shirt and shoved me into the folding table, and the whole thing went over. Potato salad, cake, all of it, and my mother screamed. He was yelling that I was ruining her birthday, which is a genuinely incredible thing to yell in that particular circumstance. He hit me twice in the ribs, short and hard, the way you actually get hit, no wind-up, nothing pretty. We went down into the grass and the folded table, and he got a thumb in my eye socket, and I am not proud of the noise I made. My cousin Dale and Mr. Kaminsky pulled us apart. 15 seconds, maybe. I had a cracked rib I would not get looked at for 9 days, a swollen eye, and potato salad down one entire side of me. Wade had a bloody nose and a torn shirt, and he was crying, which I did not expect, standing in my mother's yard with blood on his teeth, saying he was sorry. And then he said it, at full volume, in front of 16 people. I never wanted her to keep it a secret. She's my kid, Cole. She's my kid, and I've had to sit there and watch you. Mr. Kaminsky's daughter, who was 19 and had come over with a card, had her phone up from the second the table went over. She got all of it. She sent it to me that night, unprompted, with a message that just said, "I'm sorry, I thought someone should have this." Kettering PD came because, of course they did. Nobody pressed charges. My mother told the officer it was a family disagreement. I sat on my tailgate with a bag of frozen corn against my eye, gave my statement, and cried exactly once on the way home, at the light at Dorothy Lane, for about the length of a red light. Here is the ledger for the worst afternoon of my life. I got a spontaneous admission of paternity from Wade Brennan, in front of 16 witnesses on video with audio. I got my mother, on that same video, stating she had possessed a paternity result since 2022 and concealed it, which killed the defense Ivy was building, the one where I had waited too long to complain. You cannot run out the clock on a man when the clock was in your own kitchen drawer with the coupons. And I got Wade 3 days later, agreeing through his own lawyer to a legal test, because a man who has shouted, "She's my kid," in front of a neighbor's phone has nothing left to protect. It came back 99.99%. Ann Kovac watched the video in her office with the radiator banging and said nothing for a while. Then, "Your mother just testified for us, at a birthday party, in a crown." Then she asked me what I wanted at the end of all this, and told me to actually think before I answered. I said I wanted every adult who lied to me to lose the thing the lie was protecting. Ivy used it to protect her comfort. Vance used it to protect his license. Wade used it to protect his seat at the family table. My mother used it to protect the picture on the Christmas card. Anne wrote that down. Then she said the deposition was in 19 days. A deposition is a boring room where everything gets decided. 11th floor downtown, a court reporter named Gail with a stenotype, and a box of pastries going stale all morning as a monument to the idea that this is a business meeting. Ivy came in a gray blazer I had bought her for a work banquet in 2019. Her attorney was a smooth guy named Petrosian, who had clearly told her 4 things and gotten agreement on 2. Anne started easy. Employment history and dates, then slid the closing package across the table and asked Ivy to identify the signature on page 4. Petrosian said his client would not answer questions touching a pending criminal referral because by then there was one. Anne had walked the certified copies, the notary's journal, and the UPS store clerk's statement to the county prosecutor's economic crimes unit in April, and they opened a file in 9 days. Forgery and theft, both felonies in Ohio, when it is $85,000 of somebody's house. So Ivy took the fifth, 22 times. Gail typed it 22 times. Here is the beautiful part, and I mean beautiful in the coldest possible way. In a criminal case, silence costs you nothing. In a civil case in Ohio, a judge may draw an adverse inference from it. Every time my wife declined to answer, she was agreeing with me in the only language a divorce court speaks. She held for 90 minutes. Then Anne asked her to identify the payee on a wire dated October 19th, said the words St. Ansgar Academy, tuition, 2 students, and something in Ivy came off its hinges. She said I had turned her mother against her. She said I had put a video of her family on the internet, which was not true, though the accusation tells you what she was afraid of. She said, at close to a shout, that I had never once asked her in 11 years if she was happy. Petrosian had a hand on her forearm, saying her name. She picked up the binder in front of her and threw it down the table into the water pitcher, and Gail lifted her stenotype clear with the reflexes of a woman who has seen this exact thing before. Ivy stood up so fast her chair went into the window glass, and she walked out, and the door was one of those slow-closing hydraulic doors, so she could not even slam it. She had to stand there and watch it ease shut behind her. That is the image I kept. Petrosian called a recess. In the hallway he asked Anne, quietly, what it would take. Anne had the term sheet ready in her bag, because Anne always has the term sheet ready in her bag. The house on Ferncliff sold in 11 days to a couple with a baby. I stood in the empty living room and looked at the pencil marks on the doorframe by the pantry, 3 sets of them going up the wood. I photographed that doorframe, locked the door, and put the key in the lockbox. Now the last part, which I know is the part people want, so I will not pretend I did not enjoy it. The Ohio Dental Association's Fall Recognition Dinner was the 3rd Friday in September, a hotel ballroom in Columbus. Dr. Ryan Vance was receiving a Regional Service Award for volunteer clinic work, which he had actually done, which is the part that makes people complicated, and which I refused to give him credit for anyway. Karen had 2 tickets. As his wife and co-owner of the practice, she gave me one. We had been building for 4 months by then, quietly, in a way that had nothing to do with feelings and everything to do with an S Corporation's books. Karen pulled every ledger back to 2016. Priya Raman signed a statement about the 11 months in 2019 when Ivy drew a full paycheck for a job she was not doing. There were education credits Ryan had claimed and not attended, and a leased Tahoe on the practice books that lived in a driveway in Oakwood. Karen's forensic accountant put a number on it. About $240,000 of practice money routed to and around my wife over 9 years, plus my 85, plus the tuition. The Ohio State Dental Board does not care who a man sleeps with. It cares about billing, records, and a licensee who gives a police officer a statement that turns out to be false. Karen's complaint went in Tuesday. The board acknowledged it Thursday. I did not need to go. The outcome was already on rails without me. I went because I wanted to be in the room, and I have made my peace with what that says about me. I sat at table 19 with a chicken breast and green beans and listened to a man from Cleveland give a genuinely good speech about access to care in Appalachian counties. Then they called Ryan Vance up. He walked to the podium in a very good Navy suit, with a small, pale scar under his left eye from a broken pair of glasses in a parking lot in April. And he thanked his colleagues, and his staff, and his wife by name. Karen stood up at table 6. She was not loud. That is the thing people get wrong about this kind of moment. She said, Ryan, I filed with the board on the 8th. 400 people went quiet. He said her name into a live microphone, which was a mistake because it went out through the whole room. She said, $240,000 of practice money, 9 years, and 2 children by our office manager. Then she picked up her purse and walked for the doors. He came off that stage. It is the only genuinely stupid physical thing he did in this whole story. And he did it in front of 400 dentists and a trade magazine photographer. He got between Karen and the door and grabbed her arm, and I was already up. And so were 6 other people, and a hotel security kid who could not have been 25 came in low and took him off her. They both went down. Vance put a hand out to break his fall, on marble, at an angle you should never put a hand down at. And I heard it from 15 feet. He lay there holding his right wrist and making a sound a room full of dentists recognized instantly. And every person there understood at the same moment that a man with a fractured wrist does not do crown work for a while. He was charged with misdemeanor assault. Karen did not drop it, and I stood at table 19 next to a plate of cold green beans and did not feel triumphant. I want to report that honestly. I felt like a man watching a building he used to live in come down. Here's how the ledger closed, in the flat voice of a claim summary, because that is the only voice I have left. Ivy pleaded to 1 count of forgery in March. 5 years probation and restitution on the full $85,000 plus interest, garnished for as long as it takes. She works reception at an urgent care in Huber Heights now. The decree gave her the personal property, half the joint account exactly as I had split it, and nothing else. Because the adverse inferences did what Anne said they would. The court disestablished my paternity as to all 3 children and vacated my support obligation. Vance was ordered to pay for the older 2. Wade was ordered to pay for June, and Wade, to my surprise, did not fight it for 1 minute. The dental board suspended Ryan Vance's license for 18 months. The practice dissolved. Karen took the building in the divorce and reopened under her own name, with Priya Rahman running the front desk. And the last I heard, he was doing contract work at a chain clinic in Indiana, with a wrist that will never be what it was. My mother sends cards. I did not open the first 4. We speak twice a year now, on the phone, carefully. I have not been back to that house in Kettering. She was not the villain of this. She was something worse and more ordinary. A person who learned the truth and decided the truth was too expensive. Wade and I do not speak. He sends the support on time and has never once asked me for anything, which is the closest either of us can get to an apology. And then there's the part that does not go in a ledger. I had 3 children on a Tuesday and none on a Wednesday, and not one of them knew anything about it. That is the whole thing right there. Maddie did not lie to me. Theo did not lie to me. June, who was 4 and asked for a cake pop in a UPS store while her mother forged my name, did not lie to me. Every lie in this story was told by an adult with a driver's license and a reason. So I made a decision, in a conference room, with Ann Kovac telling me it had no legal force whatsoever, which was fine, because it was not a legal decision. I took my name off the birth certificates. I did not take myself off the calendar. Saturdays are mine by agreement, on paper, voluntary and unenforceable. I take them to the pancake place on Smithville Road, where the waitress calls all 3 of them sir and ma'am. I still know Theo's counties. I still sign Maddie's permission slips and keep every one, which is stupid, and I do it anyway. June is 6 now. She has the honking laugh, and she will find out someday what it means. And when she does, she is going to hear it from me, calmly, in a version that never makes her the problem, because she has never been the problem. Maddie asked me once, last summer, in the truck, whether I was still her dad. She had heard something at her grandmother's. I pulled into a speedway lot, which I appear to do at every significant moment of my life, and told her the truth in the shortest form she could carry. Some grown-ups had lied to me for a long time. None of it was hers. And being her dad was never something anybody gave me, so it was not something anybody could take. She thought about it for most of a milkshake. Then she said, okay, and asked if we could go to the library. People ask if it was worth it. The 400 dentists and the parking lot and the birthday cake in the grass. I ruined a lot of things on purpose, and I would do most of it again. But I have never been proud of the cracked rib or the split lip. Those were the 2 times I let them make me smaller than I am. Here is what I know. The only thing I have to hand anybody, blood decides what a lab prints. It never once decided who showed up on a Saturday. And the people who lied to me were never the people I lost.